and thanks Alan for the introduction. I don't need to say who I am, hopefully you heard Alan saying. Right, seeing it my way. Basically a bit of an introduction as to how I started, what my radios were like when I first started, how I use them now. And please, if anyone's got any questions, if you sit there with your hand up, you'll have an aching arm by the end of the evening. So feel free to ask and any questions along the way. Right, I first came into the hobby back in 1994, where I was what was known as a novice call sign then, which is now currently Lisa's call sign. So she's got a second-hand call sign, used to be mine, one careful owner, didn't manage to crash it anywhere. Had a few radios, was originally only allowed on 77s at the time. What makes a radio accessible? Well, back then there wasn't speech in radios, as I shall demonstrate later. The closest to it was this old radio, which just about works still, an Alinco DJG5. I'm sure Carl's familiar with these as well, yes. And anyone else who liked the handhelds. Very good sensitivity for the time, nice radio. Now what makes it accessible? Well, when I switch it on, it makes a noise. And a lot of people, if you've watched radio demonstrations on YouTube, one of the first things they do is switch off the beep, which annoys me because I like the beep. It gives me an indication of what's going on. The only button that doesn't beep, or actually there's 5, the volume up, volume down, well that's self-explanatory. Squelch, you can hear when that's not working or that's on. The light, incidentally, that doesn't make a noise. Press that, it's nothing at all. But any of the other buttons, they make noises. They're good reference points for me. When I started, I still had some useful vision, so I could see things. I'll pass this around a bit later, and just to give people an idea, when I had some useful vision, if I put my nose about an inch away, I could actually see the screen of this radio, which might give you an idea of the actual radio wave. If I go into a simplex channel and I press 0, it makes that sound. Basically, that means it's actually in simplex. If I'm on a repeater, now if I press it again, let's make sure we're in the right one. Right, now again, there's different sounds there. That's your 2 meter sound. The higher beat is the 77 sound, so I know I'm on 77s. And it will actually, if I put duplex on, it does a double beep. And that's how I can tell on that radio whether it's actually set for a repeater or not. It will do that again if I take that off, which is number 9. It makes a different sound, and it makes the lower beep tone. That's how I knew with that radio. I had to put some power in it, as it's quite an old radio, so it just about works still. But that's the Alinco DJG5, which when I had it was one of my favourite handheld radios. Moving on a little bit, let's look at a slightly different aspect. Now, connecting radios to a power supply, probably interesting for all of us. So what I've done, I bought in one of my power supplies from home. Right, again, years ago, I could actually see those terminals, let's turn it around the right way so you can see what's going on. The terminals at the back, the red and the black. Now, how would I do that initially? Well, before I used to have some vision to be able to do that. Another way of doing it is I've got a multimeter, which I shall demonstrate in a minute, talking multimeter, which if I was to have power on it, I would know which is the positive and which is the negative. Another little gadget I've got here, let's turn the volume up so you can... Volume 4, volume 5. Right, now, it's a light and colour detector. So if I actually put it at the terminal there, I can actually press the button. I need to line it up properly. Let's try that again. Black. Actually, now if I go to the other terminal, black. Oh, that's black. Go across the top.
Carl.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do a voiceover? Red.
Yeah, it actually be saying red. I don't know why that's not working, but and again, if I want light,
The colour of the light is white, intensity 90.
let's just try that again. I won't spend too much longer on that. But that was
Red.
there. We go.
Yay!
So that's another way I can actually do it now. If I didn't know.
The colour of the light.
Just turn that off. That's it. But that's a handy little gadget. It can be a bit fiddly, get some use. As usual, if you're doing these things at home, it works first time. As most demos, it doesn't want to work. Right, power supply and lead. Now, again, I used to be able to actually see the colours of these leads. So let's see if I can actually untangle that. There is a slight difference. I've not changed anything too much on the lead. One way of telling is on some of the leads you'd have a fuse in line, so that was a good reference point. But what I do now is on the plus, I put a knot in the plus, so I know exactly which way round it's going to be, and I'm not going to blow any fuses in the radio. So that's the way I would actually find that. The black I leave as it is, always just put a knot in the plus side, so I know again that's the right one to actually do it. And of course I can verify it with my good old multimeter, which I do have here. And again, this I still had vision, so I know which way round those are. The plus probe is that one, and it's slightly different to the other one. As you see, that's completely round, that's oblong. So I know exactly which one is which on there. If I flick it up, it's on diode. Now if we go on here, we should get content here. Resistance. And again, this is quite old. So continuity. I want to check a fuse. I get the sound coming through. If the fuse blown, nothing at all. So again, and I can use this for measuring AC or DC voltage. Again, obviously I have to be careful. I don't stick my fingers on the end of the terminals while they're reading the voltage. Luckily, most of the things I'm using it for is going to be low voltage anyway and low ampage, so that won't be an issue. That's quite interesting. Measuring, if I want to measure something, talking tape measure. When it picks up. Right, okay, there we go.
34 and 5/8 inches, including case.
Now I can actually change that.
40 millimetres, 1,133 millimetres, centimetres, 113.3 centimetres, meters, 1.133 meters, feet, inches, 3 foot 8 and 5/8 inches, including case.
So that's very handy. If I want to measure something, that's a standard 16-foot tape, so I can actually use that. That's how I do that.
Brian,
Yeah, sure.
was the tape measure designed for your adaptability, or is the other device you had there, you was using it to read it?
No, it was actually the tape is actually made by a firm called Cobalt Systems Limited, based in Reedham in Norwich, and they do all sorts of talking gadgets.
Oh, okay.
And that's where that came from. They do clocks, watches, talking microwaves. They do a lot of different things. But that's where I've actually got an audio spirit level as well, which has a high beat to the right, a low beat to the left, and if it's perfectly level, nothing at all. So again, that works just using sound. Radios, Icon, great radio. I do like the Icon radios. The only disadvantage with this one, because you don't have direct access, it's a lot slower reading the frequencies or where you are. If I press and hold, let's play it.
145.40 megahertz.
145.40 megahertz. Now if I turn the VFO at the top,
145.437.
turn it again,
145.4625.
4625, go back.
145.45 megahertz.
Who knows that frequency? 145.450. Right, as you can see, that takes a little while. It can be a bit slow if you're actually looking for something. What's interesting on this one though, if I go on to D-Star, I change the GB7ICC. If I go on to go back one, ICB. So it will actually read the repeater, which is really useful. Obviously, I know the frequencies, what they are, but it's nice that on D-Star it will actually read the frequencies. Should someone call on here, it will actually read their call sign as well, which is very useful. So that's the icon. There's a newer version of this one out now. I think it's the 52. But this is the 51, so good old radio. If I want to go into VFO, press this top right button here, and if I keep pressing it, I get a slightly longer beat, but I know that's on VFO. If I want to go to memory, press the second one down, and then if I want to read the frequency, I have to press and hold the bottom button. 60 megahertz. And it actually says FM on there, so that's quite handy. If I want to lock it, I press and hold this top button on the left, and now I know it's locked because I get a different sound again. So that's very useful. Obviously, if I want to open the squelch, press and hold the side again for the monitor button to actually hear what's going on. And also, when I switch it off, I get a descending tone, so I know that's gone off. That's how I would operate that particular radio. Now these radios, apart from the strap, can anyone tell me the difference between them?
Oh, no.
A stone wall of silence. There is a way I can tell which one's which. One of these is mine, and one of these is Lisa's. But apart from having to put a programming lead, you might think, how do I know which one's which?
There's a little marker that you can feel on it.
No, nothing at all. Apart from a strap on there, which one of us tends to carry one around a lot more than the other. But apart from that, there's no physical marks. There might be a few more scratches on one than the other, but apart from that, they're identical.
I would say it's going to make a sound.
Well done. Right, if I switch this one on, that's my hotspot mode. Now it's got a male voice on it. Anyone got an idea what when I switch this one on?
The dog barking?
And that's Lisa's one.
Yeah, you should have that one,
Please.
though.
Sorry, yeah.
You should have that one because you listen to it better.
You know, it's that time when you duck to miss that incoming.
Right, little story about these radios. I didn't know much about DMR. I still would say I know a huge amount, but I can get by on it. Basically, Recivis, or however you want to pronounce these radios, have a particular firmware you can load onto these, GB777, and basically what it does, it allowed me to have speech on it, written by some very clever people who knew that DMR people were starting to use OpenGT7. That's the actual software on this one, or on both of them. I had to jump in at the deep end, as you do with these things, and by listening to an audio tutorial by the guy who actually wrote the program, I actually had the lead that came with the radio, and I was able to plug it into the computer, follow his instructions, and program not only the FM channels. I learned how to code a DMR plug, which still baffles me how I managed to do it, but that's one of those things. So very pleased of that. I have one at home, Ritibus RT90, which is a home, basically a mobile dual band 2m77s, FM and EMR. Again, because it uses the same software, obviously the buttons are slightly bit different, being a home-based radio, but it does exactly the same thing. And we actually use that. Those of you who may have heard me on DMR on GB70H on a Thursday or Sunday evening, that's the radio I use. But Lisa uses this one. No, let's just check again. No, that's Lisa's one. So she uses this through the hotspot, and the hotspot I use is the Shark RF hotspot. And again, I can actually use that with the computer. Again, that might be a talk for another day at some stage when I can remember how to program the thing again. But that's something I've done as well, is actually programmed up the hotspot without any visual assistance. So very pleased with that. A few years ago, Kenwood decided to join the talking radios, and they brought out this one, the THD74. I can tell the difference because the speaker grills are different on these. Right, and it will actually speak, although that's fairly quiet at the moment, it's actually speaking. But the thing I really like about this is you've got direct access to the if you want to punch in a frequency, just make sure I'm in VFO. Yep. 145.4875. Now if I want to put the frequency for the club in, enter 14545, then press 0. Once I press the 0, it repeats the frequency, so I know it's there. I can tune up or down, but if I press the power button briefly, there we go. A VFO FM 145.450. So I can actually, if I go on to D star, it actually says DV, so I know that's gone on to D star and gone back onto FM. These have got wideband receive as well. They will receive HF. Anything below probably 20 megs, unless you've got an external area on it, you probably won't get a great deal on there. 14 meters, 14 megs, 20 meters. I have heard stuff on there just on that being outside, but obviously you put a long wire, you're going to get much better reception on there. We'll pick up the airband as well. Wideband, VHF, UHF, so things like marine you can pick up as well on there. Very pleased with. The only downside with this radio was it does eat the batteries a bit quick. So if you're using 5 watts out, it soon goes down very quickly. Right, let's switch that one off. This is the newer one, the THD75. Again, slightly different speaker group. Speech is slightly different on this one as well. There we go. Memory 1, let's go into VFO. It's actually clearer speech on this as well. The other thing that's actually very good on it, all the menus speak. So whatever menu you go into on here will actually tell you what it's doing. So it's a audio representation of what you would actually get on the screen. So that's very good. Again, you can change the mode, DV, back onto FM. If I go onto VFOB, that was one of the Volmet weather stations I was listening to when we was down on the Isle of Wight this year. So again, you can actually scan the frequencies, and you've got AM. And again, if I hit the monitor button, you can hear that sound. So that's again, you've got the single sideband. Coming on to sideband leads me on to the next thing I talk about. Everyone, or not awesome, everyone, a lot of people now use the waterfall, obviously, to see what's going on the band. From listening a long time ago, I discovered very quickly, if you want to find out whether the band's active or not, if you start down the bottom end, the CW end of the band, if you can hear CW, there's a chance you might hear voice. If you can't hear CW, forget it, you're not going to hear anything on that band. So that was a tip. I can't remember where I picked that up from, but it's been very useful over the years, and I still use it to this day. I'm not sure if there's radios that have got a waterfall that is accessible via speech, not really delved into that. I still tend to go to the bottom of the band and have a listen to see what's going on. And again, if I can hear activity on the CW end, I know I'll probably hear something a bit further up. So that's how I do that. Any questions at this point?
Brian,
Yes.
can I ask what is in the RSGB, you know, the National Association, do you know how many disabled members there are at all? Have you got any idea?
I wouldn't have a clue on that. The people that would probably know is the RABIC, the Radio Invalid and Blind Club.
Oh.
Now, they have been very helpful over the years. When I sat what was the RAE back at the time, there was an audio version of the whole of the syllabus that you could listen to, and it was on cassette tape. That tells you how long ago that was. And I think it was in about 15 volumes, each with about 90 minutes audio on there. But it was a very good way of actually learning things, parrot fashion, and going over and over again to actually do it. But they would probably be the people that would have a much better understanding. As well as being an organisation, they do things like, there's a magazine called Radial, which they do, which if you're subscribed to them, it always used to come through originally on cassette, then onto CD. But now if you log into their website and you're a member, you can just download the actual magazines to listen to.
Has anyone developed a radio that's more like Alexa, where you can speak commands to it?
That's a good point. Not that I'm aware of. I would imagine it might have a bit of conflict, because if you've got a radio with Vox on it and you go to talk to it and you've got Vox on, that could be interesting. It's actually a very sort of similar problem was eventually overcome on Windows PCs, where you had things back in the day like Dragon Naturally Speaking. Now that listens for you to actually speak to it, but years ago a lot of computers used to have a single sound card, and the biggest problem was the screen reader, which I use, basically is a audio interpretation of what's going on the screen, i.e. if you're on Outlook it would say Outlook, if you're on Google it would say Google, and so on. But what used to happen is if you were trying to run the two together, there would be a conflict, and they'd both be wanting to take a sort of control of the sound card, and that way there's problems. Once you started getting multi-channel sound cards, that wasn't so much of an issue. And now Windows has got that built in, the same as the Mac has with Siri and things like that. So that's obviously been overcome over the years, but that was an issue. I don't think the radio people have actually come into that and actually thought about that one as yet. But again, that would be something worth thinking about.
And has anyone developed, you know, when you get like a very thin neoprene or something you can just touch touch control. Has anyone thought of doing a keypad out of it that you can just put over the top, and it's got Braille on each?
That would work to a degree. The only problem with that is that there is a lot less people that actually know Braille. Having a template where you learn where the things were on the spaces would actually work. With a lot of the smartphones, whether it's Android or Apple iPhones, they have a screen reader on there, but you can hook them up to a Braille display. Now, it would take a lot of working out. I'm not saying that it couldn't be done, but if you're programming a radio and you've got a Braille display hooked up to your PC, you could certainly read what was coming out through the radio. Ham Radio Deluxe, again, is another way that I can actually get stuff from my radio and actually get it coming up on the computer, so it will actually read out as soon as I hit the VFO, as soon as I change band or change the power setting, it would read it out, provided you've got it all set up for that appropriate radio.
Sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
And before you started in radio, how have you noticed how it's impacted your life? How's it changed things for you?
How it's changed things for me? Well, to give you a brief story, I was originally a DFL down from London, and I moved down to London from London to Margate, where I used to live originally when I first moved into East Kent. And years ago, I've been one of the many people that was using CB. That was a good way of making friends and all the rest of it. So when I moved into Margate, didn't know many people apart from the people I was working for at the time. So I actually went out, bought a CB and started talking to some local people. Some of them happened to be ham radio enthusiasts and were licensed hams and heard my interest for radio and said, had you ever thought out about taking any amateur radio exams? And kindly put me into a guy, Martin Bruman, G0LGE, who at the time was running the novice course. And as they say, the rest is history. So yes, it's made a huge difference.
In what way?
In what way? The amount of people I would actually know in the area now. And the fact that radio is such an equal medium when you're talking to people.
Yeah.
I can tell people on the radio I have a sight problem, well, not a sight problem, no vision at all, or I can choose not to. No one knows. When you're talking to someone, everyone builds up their own image of what that person looks like. And sometimes it's spoiling the magic. So it's actually interesting. Obviously, I will actually say I'm quite open and will always say that I'm what we refer to as a white stick operator. And some people, if they come into sight loss later on in life, are obviously, that's a very delicate subject, but it certainly opens up the amount of people you get to know locally.
Brian, do you
Yes,
know,
Eileen.
when you go on holidays or you go mobile, do you choose a particular radio when you go to a certain, I mean, I know, certain country or certain area in the UK?
I would tend to take normally at least a couple. Because like most radio hams, you can never have too many radios with them. So at the moment, my go-to would be probably the Kenwood, because the wideband HF receive as well. This year, I just took 2 Kenwoods with me, because I can listen to, I've got 2 HF radios, 2 VHF. The only thing I didn't take this year was DMR, which actually there was nearer DMR repeaters on the Isle of Wight than there was D-Star, so a lesson learned.
Interesting.
You can never take too many radios, but no, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Life in general, my EPOS machine at work was buttons with a pinpoint number 5.
Yeah.
We've changed that, and it's now got a digipad with no tactile
Just
feel.
touchpad, yeah.
Does this have does this pose an issue for you?
It can do, yeah. The chip and pin machines you get in a lot of the places now where you buy using, if you're using contactless, it's not a problem. But like all these things, every now and again you have to put your pin in. Now those are designed like the standard telephone keypad. As you rightly say, most of them have got a 5 dot on the number 5, whether it's a single dot in the middle or one at the bottom and one at the top is sort of standard procedure. A lot of them now are going over to just basically a screen that you have got the numbers on there. Some of them are having to actually have a method where you could plug a headset into them, so you can actually operate them and you get voice guidance through the keypad where you are. And as the way I operate a smartphone, when you're on the home screen and you've got all the icons, the speech program or screen reader is what it's actually called. If I touch, say, the male icon, when I first touch it, it will just read it. If I double tap it with one finger, it will activate it. So there is ways and means of doing that, but unfortunately a lot of these vendors are playing catch up at the moment, and the same with a lot of household appliances, things like washing machines, cookers. A lot of them have got a nice visual display, but no tactile markings. So yeah, they can cause problems. Anyone else got any questions?
Yeah, Brian, when you run the net,
Yeah.
how do you know who's next?
Good question. Right, in the old days, I would have one of these. One of these little dictaphones, and I'd make a running order on that. What I do now, I normally open up, I've got a notepad file that I use. And what happens is when I actually called it EKRS. So what I've got is a list of call signs on there, and normally it's the last list from the last net. So as people are calling in, I'm balancing my mic in one hand and trying not to drop it on the floor while scooting around the keyboard to rearrange people in the right list. So I basically cut and paste that person's name and call sign in the list. Hence why sometimes I don't always get it right, because I'm actually running that and listening to my screen reader, and hopefully that's not always coming across and drowning me out. So that's actually how I operate when I'm running the net.
Yeah, you tell people to slow down while you're getting.
No, I get you to talk, so it gives me time to
Yeah.
Oh, the real truth's coming out now.
I've got another question which is kind of similar. Having been to your house and seen all the aerials,
Yeah.
how do you put those up?
With my eyes closed. No, basically, going back to my CB days, when I lived in a place called Mottingham, which is south east London, right between Eltham and Bromley, I got to know a lot of people, and a lot of people were really scared of heights. And although I had some vision, it never used to bother me. So quite often I'd go up in loft spaces where there was no light, or I'd be outside when it was dusk. And I sort of taught myself, basically, with a bit of help from some people, how to use a upper T and K bracket. The most scariest thing is when you're putting the pilot holes in, especially the first couple, because what I've always tended to do is I put the T bracket at the top, so I use something like getting up near the gutter to help line it up to get it roughly straight. This was before I had a talking spirit level, so I could get it roughly straight of how it would actually sit. Rather than use a pen or a marker to do that, I've drilled a little pilot hole where I wanted that. That wasn't an initial problem. Drilling the first hole was always pretty straightforward. But drilling the second one to line it up with the brackets, that was interesting sometimes, actually having a hole big enough for me to feel where it was, but not too big to get in the way of the brackets. And then I could make sure once it was lined up, I could use the bigger drill bit and then put the raw plugs into the wall and do it that way. The other thing that I always used was if I had a nice long pole, 20-foot pole, stand that upright on the ground, and when I put the T bracket up, I put the U clamp round the side of it, so I knew that was pretty much straight, and then put the K down below it, and I'd know it was pretty well lined up straight as well. There's one bracket on the side of the bungalow on the student side from where I live that it's not quite straight. And I think it's the only one, there's at least 3 or 4 poles that are bracket to the side of the wall, and that's the only one that isn't exactly flush. All the others I've been pretty good at managing to get them out. The telescopic mast I got, which actually goes up to 60 foot, 18 metres, I've put that up with no sight at all, and that's, as far as I know, that's pretty much perfectly straight. So I have acquired the skill, as it were, to be able to do that.
And I don't climb ladders. I just stand at the bottom if he wants help.
Yeah.
So he says, no, I can do it.
It normally takes me longer to feed all the coax through the loft because of all the boxes and stuff in the way, as you do with lofts. Every now and again I say to myself, I must have a Persian, clear some of this junk out, but like most of us, I'll never get round to it until I need to actually rerun some coax. That's obviously a problem I can't actually do. My fingers and solder don't tend to like each other, they complain about the heat. So I tend to, as Clint Eastwood says, a man's got to know his limitations, and that's definitely not one of mine that I can actually do. Yeah, that's interesting. And the other thing I always used to do, again, if I had, say, RG8 or 58, and I had several feeders with both that same thickness, I would actually put coloured insulating tape on, so I knew which was which. So like green, blue, yellow, red, and that way I'd know which one was which, and I'd always have an idea of which one went to which area, so that wasn't a problem as well, because obviously you take a PL259 out the back of the radio, then you've got an identical one, and all of a sudden which one's which? Where did that come from? But by doing that, if I do that now, or I need to do that now, I'd have a tag with a braille label on it, so I know which one it is. So that's how I'd get around that problem.
Brian's also handy if you have a meeting mobile, like Stelly Minutes or anything. Brian is on the calling, because Brian's always knows the way.
I'm lucky I have a natural sense of direction.
And always gets there, so he's always on the calling.
Any anyone else got any ideas or things that they think, how do I do that when I'm operating radio?
Well, having seen your wonderful talking tape measure, which I'm going to ask you how I can get hold of one and the spirit level, I was going to say in a rather light-hearted way, I don't suppose you've got a full set of power tools to go with it. But I realise actually you probably do.
Hence the new shed. Yeah, that's again that's going to be a work in progress. I've already had a sort of temporary lead that I can actually use down there, but I found it very. These are kindly offered to help me bring stuff down to the shed, but I said no, because what I want to do when I put things down, I want to know exactly where they are, because I still work very much on a map, an image-based memory. That's how my memory works. I still visualise things, and if I put them in a place, I can actually visualise that. I still remember how most things looked, so I can actually say, right, I know where that is. Toolbox down at the bottom end of the shed on the right-hand side. Lawnmower, as you come in the door on the left-hand side. I've got that all mapped out, and I'm fortunate that I have a good memory and can remember where things are like that. So that again really helps.
Brian?
Yes.
Because you've gone through the RSGB and you've had the experience from before and after,
yeah,
and your experienced ham, how would it be that you could get other disabled people easily into the hobby, and would the RSGB be better off trying to adapt their manuals to make it more disability friendly, bearing in mind that can be mental or physical health?
Sure, yeah. One of the things I haven't looked at, because I've sort of been there, done that and got the t-shirt, is the online manuals, how accessible they are. PDFs can be very good and they can be a complete nightmare. The reason they can be a nightmare is because sometimes when you actually see a PDF on the screen, it's actually an image. So basically, screen readers don't work very well with images. They like something that's text-based. So if it's actually a text-based document, it's much easier to read, like a web page or a Word document or a Notepad document, anything like that. Having said that, now you're getting artificial intelligence coming into it. It is able to take a picture and do what they call OCR, optical character recognition, and actually put that back into text. So some of the things that weren't accessible years ago are becoming a lot more accessible now. Yeah, that's a very good point. I hadn't really looked into that, but I'm sure they can actually work well in with the RABIC and actually have different ways, because the RABIC doesn't just deal with people with visual problems. Basically anyone who has a disability, they will be able to have means and ways of helping people do that. And again, the process has changed so much since I done it. I wouldn't probably recognise it if I had to go in and do it again. So yeah, maybe worth me having a look and seeing how people go about doing that now.
Well, bearing in mind that the word disability, it can be anxiety.
Yes.
It can be, things that some people, because everyone's affected in different ways.
Yeah, and this is another thing about learning. It doesn't matter whether you've got a sight problem or you have dyslexia. There are some very intelligent people that have problems being able to read long paragraphs, long books and everything. Doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. They have to find a different way of actually learning things. Now for me, I'm very good on audio. If I've got something I can listen to, I can absorb it. Not everyone can. Some people need to write it down. That's how they memorise things. The hardest thing of any hobby, if you're having to do some theory side to it, is actually getting into that manner of learning again, which we all done when we were younger, and our minds were like sponges and just absorbed it. But once you get older, you don't retain it for as long, but you need to find what works for you to be able to actually go in and actually be able to understand that and retain that knowledge.
Because on government websites, you'll often find they have a text document, HTML document.
Yeah.
And that could
be plain text only.
Yeah, and plain text only. They'll offer that as a choice.
Oh, it's gone very quiet.
We're thinking.
People have probably gone to sleep with me asking too many questions. That's what it is.
If you don't ask, you don't find out.
Yeah, that's it.
As you say about the audio, and it's people, different ways of learning. I mean, I had one daughter, one would read, the other one didn't have time to read. She could read, but she would prefer to listen. And she'd listen to books, and that's how, you know, it's you don't have to be, what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't have to be disabled. People learn generally in a different way.
The other thing to mention as well, we're in an age now where if you buy a new HF radio, a lot of them are very menu driven. So again, it's very visual on the screen. You haven't got a lot of buttons. You might have a few buttons for the very basic operations, but a lot of them are sort of going for the minimalist look for buttons and everything done by the screen. But again, that's okay if you've got a memory that you can remember the whole layout. It's like having a map, isn't it? And going to somewhere and remembering every single turn. Whereas if you've got a button for your VFO, for your mic gain, for your RF gain, to get into your menus, again, it can simplify it. And I always tend to favour, hence why I stick with the Kenwood radios, because a lot of them tend to have more buttons. Yes, they do have a menu system, but it tends to be quite similar from radio to radio, but it does mean just getting on the air and operating, you can actually do without having to go into a lot of the menus to actually set anything up.
Brian, did you find out, or did you find that as your vision disappeared, your hearing became more acute?
Strangely enough, no. That's basically, sight is such a strong sense, and everyone is born with it. But if you watch a child whose eyes haven't developed properly when they were a few months old, if they hear mum or dad, they will turn their head to look round them. Not that they can see them, they're using their hearing. Basically, because it dominates all the senses, when you're actually in an environment and you're using vision, and everything is visual. We live in a society where everything we do is visual, from walking down the street to signs and everything else in between. I used to work for the Kent Association for the Blind as a rehab worker, and one of my jobs was we used to have people come in and have what we used to call awareness training. We'd basically put them in simulation specs of different eye conditions, or put them under blindfold if they so wished. And what we used to find is, where we were based originally was London Road, and that's quite a busy road, as anyone who lives in the area will probably know. And if we used to take people outside, the first thing they used to say is, I didn't realise how noisy this road is, because they're having to use their hearing now, and they've not got vision. All of a sudden you become aware of it. But what you do learn to do is use your hearing and your sense of smell. Where we've got this new shed in the garden, I know how far that is down the path. I've sort of memorised it. First of all, I knew roughly where it was going to be, because it's a garden that I still have a visual memory of. But when I get near the shed, I can actually hear the echo from my footsteps. So it's called echolocation. And some people can do it very well, others can't. I can do it to a degree, because in my left ear I have tinnitus and I have high frequency loss. So my left ear is not that good, hence why if I'm sitting in a busy room, I always turn my head to the right, because that's how I can hear people when there's a lot of distraction going on, a lot of noise. So it's unfortunately a bit of a myth that once you lose your vision, everything increases. You learn to use your other senses, and that's why they become so effective. And again, that happens over time.
So it might give you an advantage on weak signals on air, on HF, on SSB or something like that.
Yeah, and again, I used to, for quite a few years, I was involved in RayNet. And it used to amaze people how I could listen to 2 or 3 radios at the same time. This was before I had hearing loss in my left ear, so I could actually filter out and knew what I was listening for. So it does come in very useful. And if I'm listening to something on a frequency, I can actually drag some of those out of the noise. But I can only do it one radio or one speaker at a time now. But it still does work. I can still do that. It's reasonably effective.
You can train Carl for me, okay?
It's a bit like human digital signal processing, isn't it?
Yeah. The other thing I would actually say as well is when I'm sorting out the radios, again, I would try and get them in a particular order. Now, I have a dual band Kenwood radio that I use for running the net, and I've got two speakers rigged up to that, one for 2 metres and one for 77s. So if I'm faffing around on the computer, catching up with emails or newsletters or anything like that, if something calls up on KS or on EK or SK, should that repeater happen to be active, I know which side of the radio that is, and I know which side I need to be on for that radio. Again, it's an audio clue, and you're using those things to your advantage. Not all some radios do have those. I know the older icons used to have the two 3.5mm jacks, one for each side, 2 metres or 77s. But it's actually a very good way to actually use these things and utilise the audio.
Any more for any more?
And if it wasn't for Brian, I wouldn't know how to switch any of the radios on.
Here, here, be the same, Lisa.
Yeah, he does. Says, don't press that button, press this button, or else there'll be a bang.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, for that.
That's quite all right.
Really informative.